Hello, everyone, and I hope you're having a fantastic day. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Carla. I'm Genially's country marketer for the US and Canada, and I'm very excited about this episode of Coffee with Genially, where we're going to be discussing how to reimagine learning through multidisciplinarity. That is, how to take ideas and strategies from different fields and incorporating them into the learning and instructional design space. And to help us explore this topic, I am thrilled to have an expert in instructional design who is passionate about pushing the boundaries and between fields and innovating in the learning, design, and technology space. I want you to welcome Mike Taylor. Hi, Mike.
Hey Carla, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely, I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we've been trying to work with you for quite a while, so thank you for accepting this invitation. To get started, I will be maybe want to start getting to know you a little bit better. Maybe share some of your background and what inspired you to, to start in the instructional designs field.
Yeah, I think I'm probably like a lot of people in this field. At When I was growing up, I didn't even know that it existed, and I sort of found myself here accidentally. It's kind of funny that I've always been drawn to learning. So even when I was a kid, there was something always energizing about the process of learning. And I was, even when I was in school, I wasn't one of those kids that was like, oh, I can't wait to get out, because I actually enjoyed learning. And so I always thought in some form I would end up as a professor or a teacher or something sort of academic along those lines, because like I said, I had no idea that instructional design even existed and that that was even a possibility. So when I first got out of school, my first job, I started as a programmer right after college, and I loved the sort of the mental challenge of that, and coding and everything that was involved. But I pretty quickly realized I couldn't handle the solitude of that, and I needed to be around people more. So, fast forward a little bit, I sort of felt like I was stuck doing work that wasn't a good fit. And so I sort of decided to make that sort of jump. And then at that point, I moved into teaching adult education. And then things sort of started to open up from there. I moved into software application training, went back to get a master's degree in educational technology. And then about that time, it started feeling like all the missing puzzle pieces started to fall into place. So it's kind of this cool intersection of technology and learning, um, design. And once I discovered that, it's felt like we're on the right path, and we can start going forward.
That's fantastic. Yeah, for sure. Those experiences show how, your approach to the field and your interest in learning and just blending disciplines, right? And speaking of which, you have an upcoming book with Bianca Baumann, which dives into how marketing techniques can benefit L&D professionals, right? Could you
Mm-hmm.
maybe share a sneak peek of practical ways instructional designers, whether they are in corporate world or in the academia, how can they apply these techniques effectively, and how, if there's any tools that might help them?
Yeah, I love this question because it gets at something that's really fundamental. And I think as learning professionals, sometimes we get so caught up in content that we forget about the people and the learners themselves. And one of the big points that Bianca and I explore in the book is how marketers excel at making really great connections with their audience. And that's one of the many things that we can learn from marketers' approach. So one of the things we talk about in the book is learner personas, and so going beyond just dry demographic data, but really trying as much as possible to understand what keeps your audience, what keeps them up at night, what are their aspirations, what challenges are they dealing with, all those sort of things, to sort of understand those important aspects that help you create learning that really resonates with them on a
Sure.
individual sort of personal level. And that doesn't have to be anything complicated. Once you sort of have that foundational understanding of your audience, you can do simple things that helps you write more compelling headlines that will, grab their attention. It will help you, craft like the appropriate call to action of what you want them to do instead of, throwing out vague instructions. Um, Tool wise, we talk about, we have a chapter in the book about marketing technology specifically. So there's some really great marketing automation tools that can help, can do two things. It can take off some administrative sort of manual labor and give you more time to focus on more important things. And then there's tools like, I'm a big fan of email marketing tools that can let you pretty easily and quickly create things like adaptive learning campaigns to help you deliver the right information to the right people at the right time, and a little small investment of time, and then you can automate that sequence and do some pretty impressive things. And then, if you combine all these things, I think, the one of the key takeaways from the whole book is sort of shifting from a mindset of, what do we need to teach, to one of, what do our people need to succeed.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's such a fresh perspective. And since we're talking about marketing and I'm a marketing professional, I want to highlight also the importance of storytelling. And when you talk about connection, I feel like storytelling is an element that helps audience connect with whatever the product or, the learning experiences. And marketing thrives on it, and so does education. So, what challenges do instructional designers face when incorporating storytelling into their work, and how can they overcome them?
When we talk about storytelling, it kind of connects back to that idea we were just talking about of really connecting with your audience. And if we think about it, like the best stories, they're not just entertaining, but they also resonate on a personal level because they're tapping into something that's relatable for the audience or for the listener. And one of the big challenges I see with some instructional designers is kind of getting beyond the sort of generic case study approach. And we've all probably sat through or witnessed some of those sessions with, this is clearly a fictional scenario. It sounds like it's written by somebody who's never actually done that job, or they never worked in the field. And so I think the secret to craft good stories is trying to mirror the real experiences and the real challenges of your audience as much as possible. Because, once you know them, and you understand their frustrations and aspirations, all those things we just talked about, it's much easier to weave stories that feel relevant and valuable to those folks.
For sure. Yeah, I agree with that. And those are very valuable tips. And let's zoom out a bit. We talked about marketing, and I want to know, how do you think maybe integrating fields like psychology, behavioral science, design, technology can transform the way we approach creating learning experiences?
Yeah, I think, looking beyond our sort of narrow lane, or getting inspiration from other fields is huge. You know, there's a really great quote. I think it was John Sweller. I'd have to check, but he basically said, if we don't understand cognitive architecture and how the brain actually processes information, then really everything we're doing, all our training efforts, are really just a shot in the dark.
Mhm.
And that was really a big thing for me when I read that. I'm like, oh, that seems so obvious. But we have to look at these other fields, marketing and behavioral science, to understand that really well. And there's we have a chapter in the book, um, on dual processing theory, about how there's two types of thinking. We have fast and slow, and one is largely subconscious. 99+% of the stuff that we process subconsciously. But there are very few, if any, instructional designers that I know who are designing to account for that fact. And one of the cool things is, once you sort of know that and have some basic understanding, is you can make some pretty powerful improvements, in simple ways. So I mentioned earlier, writing more relevant titles, making your text more readable, uh, simplifying visual layouts. Like those simple things can have a pretty dramatic impact on how people are consuming, and how well people learn from your content, from your learning materials. And it's not difficult, but we really need to understand how people process information. And that's not taught in any instructional design programs that I know of. So if we're considering other fields, and I think about how behavioral science can help us understand how people actually process and retain information, not just how we think they do or we wish they would. There's some design things we can take from the design field, that it's not about making our stuff pretty, but using some simple design principles can make things more accessible and more memorable, more attention grabbing. Marketing, as you know, that really good at things that can capture attention and drive engagement when you're competing with tens of thousands of distractions every day. And then technology, if you use it right or use it well, it's really an enabler that sort of helps us scale and maybe personalize things, that help with all those other things that we were talking about. So the reality is, like, humans and learning is really complex process. And I think if we can look to see what's working in these other areas, that we're going to ultimately be better off.
Yeah. Do you maybe have any specific or real world example where you have maybe in the past blended different strategies from different fields, disciplines, that led to measurable improvements in learning outcomes?
Yeah, so one of my favorite projects I ever did was for a national sales team. So it was insurance agents all across the U.S., and we did a big blended program. So we had half-day workshops, we had online courses, we had follow-up webinars. We took, before, during, and after measurements of performance measures, and we really tried to blend a lot of these things that we've been talking about. So, for example, we used an email drip campaign to automate the email sequences that delivered workshop information and sort of micro learning opportunities. And we tried to space that out so they get the right stuff at the right time, and they're not, here's a massive dump of stuff, good luck figuring it out.
Yeah.
We did webinars where people could share what's working and what's not working, trying to create a feedback loop for people. I mentioned we measured the impact, so we took measurements before and after, when we could see people making pretty dramatic improvements of where they were versus where they ended. And it was really cool to see those numbers, and we could actually see them going up and see that those people are putting their skills into practice, and we've got data to show that. And understanding how to fit all of those pieces together from different fields and using different tools, specifically marketing, was really cool to see how all that came together, and how successful that was in the end.
Yeah, that shows how the power of thinking outside the box and trying new things. um but I can imagine there can be maybe some resistance to the approach, right? And to sometimes professionals can feel overwhelmed or hesitant about incorporating ideas that they might not be familiar with. uh, what challenges might arise when blending different disciplines like marketing or behavioral science, technology in this learning design, in learning design, and how can we address those challenges?
Yeah, I when I see that, I typically see two things that tend to pop up, is, and they both drive me crazy, and I think neither one of them is a good excuse. One is, it it absolutely drives me insane when people who work in a learning field say, "Oh, I don't have time to learn new things." That's literally your job, is to learn new things. And so if you're not learning new things, how could anybody that you're trying to serve be expected to? That's one option. And then the other one, maybe is a little bit more common and a little bit more human nature of, that's not how we do things. Right? It's not the way we do it. Just sort of stuck in one particular mode and not really um, eager to break out of that for probably a whole host of reasons. I think specifically for people who are looking at marketing, sometimes people have the misimpression that, oh, it's gonna feel manipulative, or we're being spammy or clickbaity, or any of those sort of things, or automating things might make it feel too impersonal.
Yeah.
And those might be risk, but that's more of how you're using those tools, and not the tools or techniques themselves. And I think if we reframe those considerations, um, and think of it not as replacing the old ways or replacing our expertise, but we're sort of enhancing it and making it better. So, for example, marketing might help us connect better with our audience. Behavioral science, we might look to understand why certain approaches work better than others, and we might do an A/B test to have some data to support those decisions of which approaches work better or worse. And then, technology, I mentioned earlier, can help us scale and personalize things, in addition to taking some of that time intensive manual labor off our plate, so we can do important things like trying to strategize how to fit these pieces together. So, especially with AI now, which everybody's talking about, helping us not lose our job, but just let us work on more important, more strategic types of work.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned AI, because I think nowadays, when we mention education, that's one of the main things, right? Everything's being automated, and it's important not to use the skills, and also to teach that we need to know how to use these tools, but not to replace the work that we do, right? Maybe, do you have any tips on how we can slowly like incorporate those like certain technologies, just so that it doesn't take over our whole work?
Yeah, I think that the key is to start small. So pick something like, maybe you A/B test your course titles, or you rewrite something to make it more readable, and something that you can kind of get a measurement, and you can say, okay, well, I made this change. Now I see 50% more completions, or whatever that metric is, and just do something small and build on that. It's not about throwing out what's working, but it's trying to add some new tools to our toolbox, that helps us work even better.
Yeah, that's great advice. Yeah. Now, looking ahead, the learning and development field is constantly evolving. What's one trend or technology you believe instructional designers should be paying more attention to, and why do you think it has the potential to reshape the industry?
Well, of course,
We talk-
there's all kinds of buzz about AI. We just talked about that, and technology, and I think that's important, and everybody should be experimenting with that and learning how to leverage it, in whatever their context is. But I think one of the most powerful things that we have to pay attention to is kind of what I mentioned in the beginning, is, understanding, like, so how do our brains process information? How do they work? I talked about that dual processing theory, which, it's a fascinating idea about, we've got two types of thinking, that one quick and one's intuitive, um, one slower, more analytical. And most training, I think, gosh, very large percentage, only sort of speak to or only target that logical, analytical side. Um, but if you really want learning to stick and drive behavior change, you've got to engage both systems.
okay.
So for anybody who's read Julie Dirkson's book, she talks about this. She uses the analogy of the elephant and the rider. And we can't ignore this. It's a dynamic way that human behavior works. So if you've not read her book, that's a really great place to go and learn more about it. And another another great quote that I often refer to is, most people, we think of ourselves as thinking creatures who feel, but we're really feeling creatures that think. And so much of our behavior and so much of our decisions are made subconsciously. And what happens is we tend to react to our environmental triggers, and then we come back in and we backfill the logic and we say, oh, I thought that was a nice warm person because X, Y, and Z. But really, I was holding a warm cup of coffee and it made me feel
That,
warm towards that person. And it's as simple as that. And there's some fascinating, studies that have been done around that. And, if you think about moments, in your past when training or something like that's really clicked for you, my guess is it's probably not because of it was super logical. It's probably more likely that it resonated emotionally or it connected to some real challenge that you were having. And that's kind of a simple illustration of those two types of thinking uh, kind of being combined
for
together.
sure.
And it's not just a theoretical, we're trying to create learning that feels personally relevant, emotionally engaging, and it has to be useful, right? So we, as you know, you as a marketer, you can't just sort of trick people into things. There still has to be value and substance behind it. And so if we really understand how people learn and process information, then we're going to have much, much better chance of people, that learning actually sticking and then, driving real behavior change.
Yeah, I agree. And in marketing too, we do use that. Sometimes we don't remember specific details, but we remember how those made us feel. And
Yeah, there's
that's the way that we can remember and learn something. So
yeah, yeah, yeah. There's an interesting concept called gist memory, and it's exactly the point you're making. I don't remember verbatim the gist of it and how I felt about it. So yeah, it's an excellent point.
yeah, I love that. I think that it's it's a different way to look at learning. And for those that, to kind of wrap the conversation, for those who are just starting in instructional design, what's one skill or perspective from maybe another discipline or yeah, another field that they should be focusing on to maybe stand out and try to innovate in their field?
Okay, that's another great question, but I'm going to cheat and I'm going to pick two. So I hope that's
That's
okay.
great. Yeah,
And I would, and they go together. So maybe we can call them a pair and I'll stay within the rules. But, I would say two of the biggest things for me personally, and for I think, just about everyone, that are important for instructional designers are curiosity and empathy. So if we think about curiosity first, the the best instructional designers that I know are always asking, why do we do it this way? Could there be a better approach? Or even when things are working, they're thinking about, oh, could we do this in some better way?
design thinking.
It's like having this internal compass that's always pointing sort of towards better or towards improvement. And the empathy goes along with that, and it sort of takes what might be good learning design to a great learning design, because they're walking in the shoes of our audiences. I sort of think of it as like the Hippocratic Oath for learning professionals, and never create learning experiences you wouldn't want to sit through yourself. And when we're able to put ourselves in our audience's shoes and design from that perspective, you know how hard is it to get into the LMS to access the course, right? Like, that's a pain. I don't want to do that, so I don't want to make other people do that. And so I think when you put those two things together, your curiosity drives you to explore new approaches, new ideas, new tools. And then at the same time, your empathy is trying to make sure that what you're doing and the content you create actually serves the people's needs who are in your audience. So I think if you can do those two things pretty consistently, you're probably going to be successful no matter who you are.
I love that pair. Thank you for that. Yeah, that's great advice, and thank you for sharing your expertise today, those insights. It was a pleasure having you today for this conversation.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's always nice to talk about this stuff. I could go on for days and days, but I don't think anybody wants to listen
We
for
can
that
have a
long.
part two of this conversation later.
That'd be
Thank you for
awesome.
everyone that joined us, and I hope this discussion was helpful and inspiring for everyone. Don't forget to check out Mike's upcoming book for more insights in this topic. So until next time, and keep reimagining learning. Bye bye.